Hello everybody, I'm Mango Thunderslice, and today's video is Duo, finding connection, friendship, and marriage in a world of NPCs, right? A bunch of LGBT NPCs. And, I guess we'll start off with just some topical things, current events, but, again, putting it in a wider philosophical context, because I feel like that's really what's needed in this world. There's enough people covering the chaos and the ostensible collapse of Western civilization, but, there's very few who are actually pressing forward and creating that new world, or at least overtly going forward with that as its purpose. There's a lot of people ambling towards paradise, but very few actually directly, purposefully moving toward it. And so, Duo, yes, we're examining essentially the fundamental, aspect of human bonding, right? Whether it's between, two people as friends, whether it's between two people as lovers or partners, spouses, whether it's between a parent and a child. There's lots of different aspects of connection that we have in this world, and all of them need to be addressed and remedied essentially on an energetic sense, because again, when we have corrupted bonds among us, then we have a structure that is weak and poisoned and just brittle, and it will not stand. And nobody will be able to have a wonderful future if we don't all learn to address these fundamental bonds. And one duo was two white women protesting, for Black Lives Matter on the freeway of Seattle in the middle of the night. They would block the freeway with vans, and a white Jaguar came screeching around the vans and at high speed. And they were in all black, and the freeway was dark, and it was around a curve, and two of them got hit, and their bodies went flying across the freeway. It was a pretty intense video. One of which has died, the other is in critical condition. And they're it's a black femme march, I guess, ostensibly, but there's two white women, and the guy in the car was immediately going to be labeled a white supremacist and a direct deliberate murder, even though he was just driving on the freeway. Turned out to be a black guy, apparently an Eritrean immigrant, right? So it's all such a cluster, and the left wants to say that this is murder, but it's like when you put yourself in the course of death, and then death finds you, whose fault is it, right? It's really the same thing with Rayshard Brooks, only this is arguably even more stupid. It's like Rayshard Brooks was at least escaping something which would have been prison time substantial because of his priors, but these essentially trans liberal women, commies who are just running onto the freeway to protest what exactly are you trying to achieve by blocking the freeway in the middle of the night, by walking with and then immediately as soon as they get hit, police, where are the police, help us, and it's all the facade comes crashing down, and it's just so silly. So that's one duo, right? Is the two women who were struck and seriously injured and killed in that regard. There's the duo of a father and a daughter, right? An 8-year-old girl was shot down next to the Wendy's where Rayshard Brooks was killed by the police justifiably for attacking them, and where the Wendy's was subsequently burned down. And so already long before this, more people have died in these riots and protests, even if you want to call them all protests. More have died than were killed by police, in the last 2 years who were unarmed. So, the whole issue is entirely moot. Anybody who's still just on the Black Lives Matter train is just hopefully inadequate mentally and spiritually at this point. It's hard for me to really fathom the depth of the ignorance and just the inanity of some of these liberal, commie-minded women who think it's their responsibility not to have children, but to go and solve the rest of the world's problems, as if the world is their child, right? Even though they have no ability to mother nor take care of anyone in the world, let alone themselves. Jordan Peterson's advice rings true more and more as the years go on. Before you try and solve the world and save the world, go and month, like clean your own room and put your own house in order. That's far more useful to the world than you and your global warming, anti-racism, commie bullshit tirades, all right? Nobody needs it. Nobody wants it. It doesn't help anyone, least of all the minorities you claim to be white knighting for and defending, right? Because they become pets, right? You know how people evolve and become more sophisticated and refined and developed in this world? It's by taking on responsibility. It's by giving them more latitude and control and consequence for their own actions. And as a result of that, they get a feedback loop. They get to know what works and what doesn't. They don't get insulated from their actions. You know who is insulated from all of their actions? A child, a baby, a toddler, right? Or at least a baby. And then as we get older, even at the toddler stage, we start removing some of that insulation, and we start allowing them to experience more of the consequences of their own action. Even if they have to bonk their head a few times, at least they learn that you shouldn't dive bomb off the couch. You shouldn't run headlong towards a branch coming off of a tree or something. We all have to learn these, and it's because of the feedback of our own actions. And so it's very sad to see. I will admit that I don't actually feel any empathy or sadness for the 2 women killed on the freeway of Seattle. It's gruesome to see their bodies flying across the freeway, but I'd be lying if I said that I'm very saddened by, basically their condition. They put themselves in that condition, and people have to experience the consequences of their own actions. If we don't insulate them, they learn, and others can learn from their example. The more that we want to insulate people, whether it's based on a racial, ethnicity, or a class, or a religion, basically we are insulating people from their own actions, and we are basically infantilizing them. And we further infantilize the psychology of our culture, which just wants to throw a temper tantrum and get offended and claim that mountains need to move so that they are not offended, even though we're on the border of schizophrenia at this point. To be offended by corn pops, and to be offended by basically milk, and offended by Aunt Jemima syrup, right? To be offended by Frederick Douglass, who is literally like the most iconic early American black just example of the American story. Like, he found freedom by learning to read, and he escaped, and basically became a very successful man. And it's just amazing that they're now tearing down even these statues. It goes to show that this is not about race. This is not about anything except for a cultural revolution. They want to overthrow all the symbols of America. That is the goal, not racial justice or any sort of justice of any kind. This is the same as the Bolsheviks, right? And it's the same cult of Saturn, the same black cubers, right? The same, hidden hand behind it this time as it was last time. The only difference is now the light of God is shining on this planet like never before. And so that hand is getting swiftly cut down in many different arenas. And, it's important that we just keep spreading that light and spreading that truth, because that process is inevitable as long as we allow, that cosmic force to act through us, as long as we align ourselves with God and allow just to, Him to do the rest, so to speak. Not to say that we need to, sit back and negate ourselves. At no point do we negate ourselves or sit back, but we just proceed in action and in faith, and just know that essentially as long as we act with that spirit, everything will be okay. And it's knock on wood, it has served well, and it continues to serve well. And that is part of the religious aspect of civilization that is necessary, and how we need to actually respect the religious basis of our civilization and the spiritual basis, and that these relationships among us are meaningful. They are not random material just hookups, for the sake of, illusory temporary material pleasure. We are building something, even if you don't think you are participating in a meaningful way, even just by holding civilization together, basically keeping the lights on and the water running, and making sure people are fed. All of these are essential tasks, And if we can proceed in that spirit and provide for our, a family, then it is ultimately the most meaningful thing that anyone can do. As Tolstoy observed, the urban class of intellectuals, the atheists, the writers, and they were all miserable. They all liked to put on a big, smiley face and pretend like everything is wonderful, but fundamentally inside they were all miserable. And he went out to the countryside and he saw the people living off the land, and he said, these people are materially far more destitute. They have far less, but they are genuinely happy. Like, they don't put on a big smiley face on the outside all the time, but genuinely on the inside, they have meaning and purpose in their lives because they have family and they have their connection with the land. And the same thing is true in all cultures. There's not just a observation to where Tolstoy was living. It was an observation metaphysically, as we've addressed in the other videos. It is important to have that sense of connection, because otherwise this world will sweep you away. Even if you think you're on the right side, this world will sweep you away if you don't have a strong psychological, energetic foundation. And so that foundation again brings us back to the bonds among us, and finding friendship, finding connection, finding marriage, in a world of NPCs, because most women today are totally and fundamentally psychotic, right? Absolute nutcases, and that is because of the mass media program and the feminist, program. It's completely taken over their brains like a mind virus. It is most akin to some sort of degenerative brain disorder or mind virus. It is really something out of a sci-fi movie at this point. How much that these, people can completely abnegate from reality entirely and just substitute their own feelings. And they're not even their feelings. It's feelings that were imbued into them, programmed into them by the mass media. And not, of course, not accidentally. This is all very deliberate. The whole purpose of the generation of a mass media, culture was so that they would have this kind of, dog leash type aspect control over the minds of the human species. And, it really just seems to be most effective in white women. Like, again, it's where I've had to, basically, I'm only on a few social media platforms, but it's like really astounding how heavy some of these, white girls who I used to go to high school with and college with and have known since, how hard they've gone on this whole basically colonializer and anti-racism, fundamentally just drinking the Kool-Aid and believing that we live in a structurally racist society, when in fact we live in the least structurally racist society on the face of the earth. And that is a fact, right? Not to go all hoorah USA, but for a factual basis, we have the least structurally racist country in the world. Name one country that is less structurally racist than the USA, right? And you might think that, like Canada or some of the Scandinavian ones, it's not true. I mean, they're basically actively importing, but again, that's still a form of racism. In terms of actual barriers to success and creating generational wealth for a family that essentially comes from nothing or comes from something, it doesn't matter. The point is class mobility and opportunity, and not keeping people back, under the law based on a person's, background. But, if judging a person based on their behavior isn't the same as judging a person based on their race or their class or their background, right? If you're an armed, violent criminal, no one should treat you as if you're a hopeless, victim, right? You have agency. You're responsible for your actions. And so, there's no right that you have for anybody to treat you as a child when you actually, are an adult and you're committing crimes against, the people in this society. Again, back in 2016, I didn't really care about the wall. I didn't really care about illegal immigration. I was planning to emigrate from this country and leave, but now I fundamentally get it. The fact that Trump has suspended the H-1B visa program is a major win for America. Decoupling from China is a major thing, right? This duo is, some duos are, destined to divorce. my parents and many other parents and people in the world, they just, can't reconcile their differences. And so it's better just to split up. And that's what's happening with us in China right now. And hopefully we can have that spiritual revolution and prevent it from going into a full-scale, kinetic conflict. But we can keep it relegated to just an economic trade thing and really incentivize and bring back and fulfill American manufacturing and new businesses, not bringing back petroleum, not bringing back steel, but using the legalization of hemp and making bio-based commodities on an mass industrial scale. We can make materials that are stronger than steel, lighter than steel. We can pour it into place, and it's all basically renewable and organic. We can grow it from the ground, right? And this is all essentially what I am personally working on bringing to the world, just for a little sneak peek, right? And it's all about creating bonds with people, building that network, that great spider web, and it's the spider that moves is our collective will, right? It's kind of a grim and dark metaphor, but spider is created by God too. Everything here is created by God, and it's all there to teach us a lesson. And speaking of China, before I leave that, I meant to put this in the soul authenticity video 2 videos ago, but China just got basically, one company went under, got revealed for having 83 tons of gold that was basically just gold-plated copper bars. And so this is basically 4% of what China's gold total stash is reported to be, which is pretty amazing, because they're probably not the only one who is faking the gold. And this is huge. And so basically it just reveals that even with gold underlying, if we have a fraudulent civilization, then everything becomes fake from the bottom up, or from the top down, if you will, from the core outward. And so China is a powerful country, surely, but the fact that the Chinese Communist Party is so fundamentally unethical behavior and incompetent behavior often go hand in hand. They might be very apt to and successful and intelligent when it comes to covering up their own lies, but they're not always able to control the extrinsic effect. We've got so many lies in play in our society right now that they're canceling each other out, right? Because it's so fundamentally ridiculous. But they didn't plan all this out. This is all on the fly. They might have had certain parts of it planned out, but they're throwing everything they can right now at the wheel, to see if it'll stop. They want to see if they can stop Trump from getting elected, from China, to the rest. And of course, Biden is very connected to China as well as Ukraine and all this foreign money. Ukraine was one of the biggest foreign donors to the Clinton campaign back in 2016, and so it's just funny again, foreign influence. Oh, Trump's controlled by Russia because he doesn't want to, drop nukes on them. It's like, meanwhile, the people who are actually bankrolled by China, Ukraine, and Saudi Arabia, and other certain countries in the Middle East, they don't get the spotlight for even a single minute, let alone, 4 straight years of just absolute fraudulent, pseudo investigations by incompetent and unethical people. Again, they're unethic and their incompetent aspects go hand in hand. And so the light is shining, and people are finding out the fraud, and it is leading us into this new civilization. And so yes, the old world and many of its trappings are falling away, but at the same time we are having kind of a revival and rebuilding what was valuable about the old world, and also adapting the genuine new technologies and new aspects of life in this world in the current age. So it's really just important to recognize, as far as relationships go, that you are the one who has to be worthy of your partner, and then once you have that self-esteem, your partner should also be worthy of you. But it's totally a two-way street. And as far as Space Panther and myself, I feel that there has been no love lost since we've been together. It's only grown, and that's because we are moving in the same direction. But I take my responsibility for my happiness onto myself. We both learned to become, happy on our own as individuals, understanding sort of that we might never find a partner, right? We might live our entire life on our own. So it's important to have that mentality just to strengthen your own psychology and not to be codependent on somebody, but to actually have it be a symbiotic growth and not a parasitism. Because I see a lot of that in the media archetype relationships, is that it's a lot of parasitism and completely false, fraudulent kind of appearances, and the laugh track sort of sitcom type relationship and stereotype. It's all just like the people who are jacked into the matrix and participating in and consuming the media are just really going down the drain mentally right now. And but we can focus on whatever we want. We have that power. That is, again, our free will. We can't necessarily create Rome, create worlds overnight, but we can focus our attention and shift it, on a whim. And that's very powerful to understand that we do have that fundamental choice, and it cannot be taken away from us. Even if I was in prison, in solitary confinement, I could still choose to think about whatever I wanted, and to go in that inner space wherever I wanted. And so, again, we are not sacrificing ourselves, we're not negating ourselves, we are identifying ourselves, we are finding that seat of the soul, and we are building on it. We are swinging around and putting string around the string ball, right? All of our experience is accumulating in that soul, in that spirit. And when we actually live our life in confidence and knowing that we are fulfilling our work and our path, others will see it, or at least the ones that matter. You don't want to find, you don't want to find a low IQ partner who's just there to satisfy material, based desires. You want to find someone who will add to you spiritually, who will provide for a family and not just, basically be there to spend money on shoes and complain, but to actually help in the work that is substantial and rewarding but very, very challenging of raising children. I knew that I would marry Space Panther when I saw how good she was with children, and when she was a massage therapist. She likes cannabis and psychedelics, and basically she was good at working with kids. She's worked at a Montessori school, which is not just working at a school. Like, working at a school does not impress me at all. In fact, that would have taken points off the score, but the Montessori, that adds points to the score. And I just saw just how good of a person she was, and that this is a person who would, if I were to have kids, this was before, we decided to, I knew that she would be the type of person that I would want to raise my kids. And so, again, it's a fundamental different aspect of what you're looking for when you're looking for a woman to raise your family and everything that you will, continue to exist as. Eventually we'll pass away, but our family will still be there, right? Just as my grandfather passed away earlier this year, yet still I am here. He lives through me. And, I am far from gone, and I've already cast my seed forth into this world, and so my line isn't going anywhere, most likely. So, and that's a good feeling to have that connection. And that's what we need to focus on, because the nuclear family is going to be the most rebellious thing in the world, right? In an unfree world, you must make your very existence so very radically free that your presence is a state of just a statement of rebellion, right? And if they want to go forward with Commie-land, that's exactly where the fight is going to be. The nuclear family choosing, medical procedures and vaccination for our kids, choosing their education, not to be taught gender-bending commie propaganda, freedom to choose our freedom of movement. At this point, COVID has illustrated that they will take any kind of control under the name of medical fascism. Freedom to conduct our own businesses and not be subject to a carbon tax for the sake of completely dubious and specious pseudoscience known as global warming theory. All of these are going to come down to the nuclear family. Freedom to bear arms and to have weapons that will actually allow us to protect ourselves and our family. You know, all of these, again, the locus of rebellion at this point in history is at the home, and, you know, the nuclear family. And so, you know, castle doctrine, make your home your fortress, and you know, spiritually and physically to a degree, always know how you will defend yourself. The police are not responsible for protecting you. You are responsible for protecting you and those who you care about. As you know, it's like for years they said, oh, gun control, you don't need a gun because the police are there. And now they're saying, oh, we're going to defund the police. It's like, okay, so now we know you were full of shit the whole time, right? And so that you don't actually care about us being able to protect ourselves at all. Okay, do we have that right? Have we established that clear enough at this point? All right. Well then, you know, that gun control thing, yeah, it's going out the window. There's more first-time gun registrations right now than in the history of the country. And these are people who are not, you know, again, these are first-time gun registrations. These are not, you know, there's plenty of people who are buying extra guns and lots of ammo. But, you know, people now see that we can't rely on the police. And now the police are totally vilified, so they don't want to be protected by the police anyway. So guess what? Gun control is dead in the water. Silver lining, if ever there was one, to all this chaos. And so yeah, I guess that's my video today. It's really just important to focus on your own authenticity and overcome your own, you know, dark night of the soul, and find that genuine meaning in your own life, because that is a genuine peace and a genuine strength. And when you have that, other people will see it. It's almost, you know, I never was one for pursuing women aggressively, but more of the Venus flytrap model, to use sort of a brutal analogy, of just attracting with you know, bright red color, and then, you know, finding who was most attracted by it, and using that as a bait before I make the bond, right? But you know, and that's the other thing. I spent a fair amount of time kind of chasing bohemian women who, you know, were entertaining a lot of different, you know, men's fantasies, and just kind of, you know, just women who didn't necessarily, who I found to be interesting, but didn't really reciprocate any sort of love. And you know, so it's important to find someone who loves you. Don't chase down someone because, oh, you like them and they're so beautiful, and, you know, you want to have them because they're this object of desire. Find someone who genuinely loves you and adores you and will be with you for the end of your days, because that's what I almost forgot one of the core points of this video is we watched this Epstein documentary, Jeffrey Epstein video. Now that Ghislaine Maxwell has been arrested, big news, you know, unfortunately she will soon commit suicide because she's going to the same correctional facility that Jeffrey Epstein did. But one thing in this, you know, in the documentary didn't get into, you know, the Mossad Israeli intelligence affiliation, you know, or, you know, the blackmailing of American politicians. It was very much, you know, these women are victims and Jeffrey Epstein got away because he was a rich white man. Right? And, oh yeah, Trump. And, you know, it's so very predictable, but it was interesting to listen to some of these women. And one thing you notice is that they inevitably have weak family backgrounds, generally single family backgrounds, right? Having a two-parent household is the most important thing that anyone can do going forward. We can stop the black family from collapsing by just encouraging, you know, I don't know, I can't, you know, make choices for black families, but we can at least take away the welfare incentives for single mothers. We can stop with the glorifying of single parenting as if it's the same as a two-parent house. And all this, you know, this daytime TV housewife bullshit, not housewife bullshit, because they're not even housewives. It's just The View, right? These jabbering women talking about how, oh yeah, with single women, you don't need a man, you know, you can do it all by yourself. It's not true. You will absolutely ruin your children by basically being a single parent. And, you know, I have, you know, people and good friends of mine who have had to split up, and at least there's still, you know, there's two parents in their lives. But, you know, staying together, even if it's a rough, rocky foundation, you know, or process, you know, it's so much better for the kids. It's so much better for their psychology. And again, you see these people who are rioting in the street, and it's not people who had a loving mom and dad in the house. You know, it's the exact opposite. So find your strength, find your center, be a good person, you know, strengthen your energy vortex, find your partner, build that destiny together, create a family, and we will fix the world in very short order, or at least we'll fix it enough for ourselves and our family to enjoy. So that's my video. Hope you guys have a good one. I'll see you next time. Cheers.
Ah.